Hi, I'm Mary Sue Rominger. I'm on the board of directors and a volunteer for the Bateman Horne Center. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We will post a video of tonight's presentation on our Bateman Horne Center YouTube channel within a day or so. We do plan a Q&A at the end of the program, so those of you on Facebook Live can use the comments section to ask your question. Our speaker tonight is Linda Milne. Linda is a longtime patient with the Bateman Horne Center. She's volunteered from time to time for many years and has also served on our board of directors. Linda also contributed to a blog for ME, CFS, and fibromyalgia patients called Linda's Corner that was on our previous website. Not only is Linda an advocate for these illnesses, she has received multiple Volunteer of the Year awards, most recently being in 2014 and 2016 from the Chamber West Chamber of Commerce here in the Salt Lake City area. And this year she is being honored by Utah AARP for community service, helping seniors to prepare and have a plan in the event of disaster. Tonight, Linda will share with us how a person with significant health limitations can find a sense of accomplishment. Please welcome Linda Milne.
Thanks. Thank you, Mary Sue. Good evening to those of you that are here in the Bateman Horne Education Center. To those of you out in Facebook land, a warm hello. And to those of you who will be seeing this perhaps at a later time on our website, greetings to you as well. Before I start, I need to let you know that I have some voice problems that occasionally creep up. If that happens, and I cough and spurt, don't worry, don't be embarrassed for me. I'll get through it and we'll continue. I just want you to have a heads up on that. Sometimes my asthma kicks in and it's always a surprise. I am 22 years into ME/CFS, and along the way I managed to acquire fibro and a bushel basket of other illnesses as well. ME/CFS forced my medical retirement, and I had to leave the workaday world early. And I really came to miss having a professional life for the reasons more than a paycheck. Caring for myself and trying to manage this new abbreviated life put my attention squarely on myself. And I was a bit uncomfortable with that, I would say. Then along came the needs of my elderly parents. And there is nothing quite like watching over someone else that's dependent upon you to reshape your thinking. It gave me the opportunity to acquire more kindness and more generosity, which are attributes that had kind of fallen by the wayside for me. And one of the lovely things that it presented for me is that it gave me a sense of accomplishment. If my parents were winning, then I was winning. It was a wonderful feeling. After my father died, I ventured out into the community, and I went and attended a community council meeting. And just to see what was going on in the world outside the tiny world that I had been living in for some time. That meeting led to a lot of other meetings, and it amounted to an investment of 90 minutes a month. I eventually agreed to move out of the audience and move up and take a seat as a council member. I missed a few meetings, as you might imagine, but it turned out not to be a source of stress. I just simply called and asked to be excused. And the one thing that I learned is that almost every board meeting, whether they're healthy or not, the members occasionally don't attend. So I really didn't stick out like I thought that I would. They asked me if I would accept a hat that no one else would wear. And It was to be the emergency prepare person for my community. And truly, nobody else would wear the hat. They thought that I was well qualified because I had been in 3 earthquakes and I had been in 3 civil riots in my adult life. And I had even spent some time preparing my corporation in LA for the big one. At the point that I took on that hat, I sat down with my colleagues and I told them about my illness. And I said, I'll agree to wear the hat, but here's the thing. I'm not sure how much benefit I can be to you, if any, because of my illness. But we decided to give it a go. And it turned out to be a perfect fit. They were patient and understanding, and I liked wearing that hat. So off we went. And now Canyon Rim had someone in charge of emergency preparedness. Even though I would say that my contributions were sparing, I was appreciated. And I cannot tell you what a great feeling that was to have that coming my way after a long time without it. I'm a dozen years down the road now, and surprisingly, I'm still volunteering. In fact, before I knew it, I had become somewhat of an emergency prepare specialist. I've learned that one person can accomplish even a little. In my case, it was from my office daybed, a portable computer, occasional meetings, and occasional presentations. And it still is operating that way. My overriding motivation in taking that hat was and still remains that I want to help people who are challenged by the prospect of preparing and responding to a major disaster. That includes all of us with this illness and older people. So my burning purpose in life is to help people prepare appropriately for a major disaster. And this is the truth, not an overstatement. Preparation can be the difference in living and not living in a disaster. But emergency preparedness is not really the focus or the subject of my talk tonight. But if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to squeeze in a little information on the topic, just because I can't help myself. First of all, I'd like to share a rather harsh reality with you. No professional responders are coming for you or for me in the event of disaster. We're not on their radar simply because we have major physical limitations. We are 100% responsible for being able to manage 3 different emergency response scenarios, and I just want to touch on them so that you have this information in your pocket should you ever need it. Those 3 things are sheltering in place, on-foot evacuation, and evacuation by auto. So, sheltering in place, it means exactly what it says. You're going to hunker down in your own home on your own property. Now, you may determine to do that as a choice of your own family just because it feels like the safe thing to do. Or you may be mandated by authorities to do that very thing. That's happening right now in the big island of Hawaii. Hurricane Lane came calling and dropped 30 inches of rain in a very short period of time. The Red Cross did what they routinely do, that wonderful organization. They opened shelters for people that were displaced because of the hurricane. But here's the thing, there weren't enough Red Cross resources. So the authorities asked the residents to shelter in place, wait for this, for 14 days. Now, so I'm going to ask you that question. You can just kind of answer it to yourself. If we had a major emergency tonight and you had to shelter in place in your home on your own property for 14 days and not able to leave your property for any provisions or supplies, how would you do? Would you be okay? If you have any doubts, may I take this opportunity to encourage you to take your time, do it gradually, but to go out and get enough provisions and emergency supplies that you could say to yourself or anybody, if we were required to hunker down and shelter in place, our family could do it and we would be okay. So this means a lot of clean drinking water, food, first aid, bathroom tissue, medications. If you've got infants at home, it means diapers and maybe formula. If you have some furry members of your family, you need pet food, enough for them for that same period of time. Now, what if that event also carried with it total disruption to the infrastructure? And don't think this is uncommon. It is not. And so think about these 14 days again with no power, no safe drinking water source, no working toilets, no garbage collection, no gasoline for sale, etc. And these are realistic situations. You can probably think of maybe the last 5 major disasters we had in this country. In some places, all of these things happened. So I'm going to say a word about sanitation because almost no one does out in public. And I'm willing to talk about poop. And I'm one of the few. So let me just give you a shorthand version. If you are hunkering down at home and the sewers aren't working, this is what you do. Have on hand thick plastic bags that you can line your toilet with. Put the seat on it to hold it in place. Use that bag for solid waste only. Urine is not toxic, and don't combine the two. After you've used the bag, throw in some kitty litter or some sawdust, maybe some deodorizing chemicals, disinfectant, and that's how you do it. And when those bags need to be replaced, you take that bag, and what are you going to do with it? This is the really important piece. This is where public health falls apart in major disaster, because our human waste is so toxic that if we don't handle it properly, it's an open door for a very quick and fast-sweeping disease. There's plenty of information on the internet for you. I'm just going to give you a down and dirty on this. This is one of my solutions for handling used solid waste. The bags go in this galvanized tin can that has a tight-fitting lid. It's a lot better than nothing. It's not near as good as a hazmat drum or a cat hole that's 36 inches deep on your property. But this is something that you can buy at a hardware store, and you can use it for that purpose. Now, I gave you the first scenario, sheltering in place. The second scenario is on-foot evacuation and having to do it quickly. You've got to take enough provisions with you to take care of you and your family for 96 hours. That's 4 days and 4 nights. Did you notice I didn't say 72 hours? I said 96, because that is the new standard from the professionals, telling us in the event of a major disaster, it will take at least 4 days and 4 nights for help to reach us. So if you're evacuating to some kind of a gathering place in your community, you've got to arrive with provisions in hand because there will be nothing there for you. Now, this particular poster, I used to bring all of these carts to show them, but it got a bit difficult. But this is a picture of the 4 carts that I have pre-packed in my garage to serve my family, which is made up of myself, an aging woman with health problems, and my brother, a senior with health problems. So there's 2 carts, one for each of us. And we can, because we have 2 hands, off we go. We can pull those supplies with us. I'm very involved in the development of the gathering place in my community. So I know for sure that it's only what we bring with us that is going to be there to help us. Now, you'll see on this, you can see lots of water in every one of those carts. Lots of water. I've got sanitation, including a privacy tent, food, means of cooking, hygiene, first aid, sleeping. I have a seasonal bag that I put on that in the winter. It's got things that will keep me warm. In the summer, I pack something else. But that's what some of the components are for my on-foot evacuation, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. One of the reasons that you need carts and not a backpack is because of water weight and awkward sanitation supplies. How much do you think a gallon of water weighs? Just the water weight. 8 pounds? 8 1/3 pounds. You're on the money. Now, the experts tell us you must have at least 1 gallon of water per person per day to get through those 4 days and 4 nights. That's over 33 pounds. A lot of the mass care experts tell us we want you to have 3 gallons per person per day. You almost can't wrap your head around the potential problem of getting that much water to a gathering place. But it is the single most important component. Water alone will keep you alive. You don't need food, you don't need a lot of things, but you must have water, and you must have a means for your family to have safe toileting, no matter where you are. One of the silver linings that I've seen many times in disasters are the beautiful stories of strangers who step up to help people in need that are either injured or in desperate need of comfort because they've lost everything. It's so hard to confront, and yet it's such a beautiful thing to see the way that humanity can rise to the occasion and help people they don't even know. And it is a brilliant opportunity for neighbors to help neighbors. I have built warm relationships with the people on my street because I like them and because I want to do that. But I've especially developed relationships with younger, stronger families. And I have asked them, in the event of an emergency that captures our community or something regional, will you be willing to check on my brother and I? We have our own provisions. You won't have to provide for us, but we may need help. We're old. And all 3 families that I've asked have been very happy to sign on to the Milne Rescue Plan. And I strongly, when I talk to people who have illnesses or who are aging, I stress to them the importance of building warm relationships with the people that live near them. Not across town, not a half mile away, not their kids in another county, but the neighbors that are right there with them. Build those warm relationships and confide in them. that you have an illness that may prevent you from being able to evacuate safely, and ask if they would be willing to help. And don't wait until the disaster strikes to make these requests. These are pre-disaster arrangements that you must make. And you'll be surprised how friendly and willing people are to accept the fact that you have limitations and that you may not be able to take care of yourself or evacuate if it were required. The third scenario I want to talk to you about involves your automobile, and that's evacuating by auto. If you've been following the wildfires here in the West, you know that thousands of families have been forced to evacuate their homes in their automobile. I keep an emergency kit in my cargo hold of my very favorite new car. And I encourage people to do that in every family vehicle. Have enough provisions in your cargo area or your trunk that you could take care of yourself if you were caught in a disaster away from home. Now, in many situations, people want to evacuate, so that would be one of the reasons that you would. In other situations, you'll get a knock on the door, or there will be something that goes out over emergency communications to tell you, grab and get out of your home and your neighborhood. You've got to evacuate by car quickly. So have provisions there and know what you want to take with you other than provisions if you have a precious 5 minutes to gather and run. There have been many times in the last 22 years that I would not have had the strength to prepare and not the strength or even the desire to respond to an emergency or disaster. I was living one sick day at a time, and it could happen again. But the one thing that I did have the sense to do was to communicate to my neighbors and let them know. I've always been willing to let my neighbors know the condition that I'm in and ask if they would be willing to help in the event that I needed it. And I've never been turned down. I landed on the topic of emergency preparedness tonight for a minute because it is my passion and it is a purpose that I have in life. And it has actually been quite magical in my life because it has brought passion and purpose to me. It by itself, having purpose, has moved me from a point of being total effect of my illness to a point where I feel that I am cause over my illness and my condition in life. Do you have a passion? Do you have a purpose? If you do, I invite you to think about the possibility of taking an assessment of your health, and if you're able to maybe step out and add some kind of volunteering to your life. It doesn't matter how much time, but if there's a group that you are passionately connected to or care about, you might think about it. You might end up being surprised how much more meaning it gives to your life and how wonderful that feeling of accomplishment is. But I want you to keep in mind something. I have no spouse, I have no children, I have no grandchildren. Now, most of you that are seeing this, that are here, or that are out in Facebook land, or that will be seeing this on our YouTube channel, most of you probably do have a family. And I want you to know that that may be purpose enough for you. And that may be where you get your accomplishment. And don't feel like you have to step outside of the care of your family to feel a sense of accomplishment. But on the possibility that you are able to do it, I just put it out there as a possibility for you, that it is rewarding and that it can make a change in your life, especially if you're someone who spends a lot of time being bedbound and housebound every now and then. The wins that I have had by volunteering and doing some other things in my life have given me confidence that I had lost when I became ill. And that confidence felt like a right pair of shoes. It was a wonderful feeling to have that back in my life, even in just some small way. So I took that confidence that I had gained from my community work and I added some more to it, and I decided that I was going to travel. I'd been waiting and waiting and waiting to get well so that I could travel internationally. I've been waiting a long time. Last year, about this time, I had a special birthday, and I am a woman of a certain age. And I said to myself, okay, Linda, you're not waiting any longer. You're going. And you're going to take an international trip, and you're going to be gone for a whole month, and you're traveling alone. And let's see how this is going to shake out. Now, I decided I was going to travel to the UK because I feel like I've been connected to that part of the world for lifetimes. It just felt like the place I needed to be. And I wanted to visit all 5 of the countries in that region, those that are in the UK and Ireland as well. I used my travel miles that I'd been saving for a long time, and I sold a piece of property, a little piece in Arizona, to finance my trip so that I didn't have to upend my day-to-day finances. I selected a travel agency and I said, make my accommodations in all 5 of those countries. And I learned something. They did that, but since then, since I have returned home, and I'm still researching this idea of international travel so that I can do it again and so that I can help others do it. And I realized that there are people out there who are travel advisors. They charge by the hour, and they're very willing to sit with you, hold your hand, plan it down to the nines, whatever it takes for you to be comfortable. And that's the kind of professional I am going to use next time I travel. I'm happy to spend any amount that they require so that I am working with somebody that I know understands me, my limitations, and is very willing to do everything that I want and need. And I found just such a person, and she lives only a mile from me. My first stop was England. So I flew from here to Heathrow, and I flew first class because of my travel miles. And it was wonderful. I had never flown first class, for a long time anyway. And now you have a sleeping compartment and you have a space to call your own. And Delta, I must tell you, was remarkably helpful to me. They had wonderful service. And I just put that out to you that I don't know how they are on all flights, but on that one, they were remarkably helpful. I took a train from Heathrow, and my friend Allie met me. She drove to where my train let me off, and we went to her home. And that is Allie Allen. And she was a nurse here for a very long time at Bateman Center, and she's my dear pal. And she knows the limitations of my health almost as well as I do. And she was part of the planning of my trip from the very beginning, and she was my cheerleader. And her confidence added to mine gave me this big certainty that I could really pull this off. She lives in a village of 4,000 people called Kington. She owns a B&B, a lovely little place, and owns a retail store there for long-distance walkers who come walking past her village on some of their national trails. So it was wonderful having a 4-day visit with her. It was just delightful. At my insistence, and I really had to arm twist, but I hired her so that I could have someone in my life who was familiar with how to navigate the rail system and how to navigate using small airlines. And when I travel, I'm very dependent on wheelchairs and my cane. So those two things were my biggest worry. How will I get from one city to the next on a train by myself with all my luggage, including my CPAP machine? How will I transfer from train to train? How will I be on one of these small airlines? Delta was very accommodating, wheelchair and help, but what will it be like? So we worked it out. She found the right phone numbers for me. She gave me the right instructions, the right things to say, the right departments to talk to. And it was worth everything. And once I had that information and had experienced it, boy, I realized I would have been in deep trouble without that, traveling alone and not being able to make those kind of transfers. I just didn't have the physical strength or stamina to do it. But it's quite wonderful to arrive at a train, look out the window, and see someone in a wheelchair saying, I'm here for you. And they would take my luggage, put me into the chair, and off we would go to the next platform where I would catch the next train. Or if that was a destination point, they would take me to a cab station where I would get a cab and go to my next hotel. It actually worked out pretty smoothly, but only because I had the secret codes. If I hadn't have had that, it would have been difficult. I moved from Kington to Cardiff, Wales, and from Cardiff, I went up north in Wales to Llandudno, which is a resort town on the North Sea. I went from there to Manchester, England, and from there I went to Dublin, Ireland. From there I went to Belfast. From there I went to Glasgow, Scotland, and from there I went to Edinburgh, Scotland. From there I went to Oxford, and then I caught my Delta flight and came home. It was a 30-day trip altogether. By the way, let me tell you, I had been given great instructions that I was going to be able to use Uber all over my destinations. Oh, did that turn out to not be true? The only city I was in that had Uber was Cardiff. And the rest of the cities, there's pretty much a big war between the cab unions and any of these private Lyft companies. They are not welcome, and it's a big deal. So when I needed a cab in all the other cities, I just used the black cabs that you're used to seeing. I was so happy to find that there's such a thing in the United Kingdom, and apparently all over the world. They're called hop-on, hop-off buses. Have you ever heard of them? Aren't they marvelous? Oh, so here's how they work. They cover a route of popular sightseeing destinations, and they just run those destinations all day long. And it's set up so that you can hop off, see a destination, wait 15 or 20 minutes or 30 after you've done your exploring of that location, and then one of their buses will come by and pick you up again. It most likely won't be the same bus you exited on, but it'll be another one in their company, and they'll offer the same thing. I always chose buses that had live commentary instead of recorded commentary, and it was just fabulous. When I would arrive in a city, the first thing I would do would be to find the hop-on, hop-off bus that was nearest to me. I would get on, and I would ride the whole circuit once or twice. And then I would take the map and I would decide what my destination points were going to be while I was there for the 3 days that I would be using hop on and hop off at that particular city. I chose a modest number of destinations each day, and I was pretty comfortable with my choices. Hop off, see them, and then get back on. But I'm very sensitive to my health, and the last thing I wanted was a relapse halfway across the world. So I took great care. And when I ran out of energy and when my stamina was failing, I changed my itinerary. And instead of hopping off, I would just stay on the bus and I would ride around and listen to the commentation again. And I would visit with people on the bus. And it was wonderful. I felt great about it. I never felt disappointment. The whole time I was there, no matter what changes that I had to make, sometimes without any notice, never felt disappointment. I guess it was because I was so grateful to be there. I was so proud of myself that I had undertaken this journey and that there I was traveling internationally as this old broad, and I was there by myself and I was making it happen. And I always had a smile on my face just because of the happiness that I had. Now, the whole time I was traveling, I never ran into, not even once, another woman traveling alone of any age, of any health consideration. Just me. So when I would talk to people and they would see me get on the bus alone and they would say, "Where's your husband?" And I'd say, "Don't have one. I'm here by myself." And they would go, "Really? Whoa, you're either very, very brave or very, very crazy." And that was pretty much what they all said, and about that same way. Some people just thought it was wonderful what I was doing, and other people were just worried sick for me. I ended up, pardon me just a moment. I ended up falling in line behind the people that thought I was brave and not the people that thought I was crazy. I paid for a 4-star trip only because I couldn't afford a 5-star. Comfort is a very big deal for me because so much of my trip is spent in my hotel room. So I want to be happy with where I'm staying in any of the cities. Hotels were just such a significant part of every day of my travel life. I'm a political wonk, absolutely. My favorite sites in any city were city halls and parliament buildings and palaces and political venues. I did a lot of art and history museums, libraries. Any place where I could get a feel for the people in a historic sense or them now, day to day. That was what I wanted for my trip. And I loved the marvelous university campuses. I went on many campuses and explored them thoroughly as I could, I should say. I even took part in 2 demonstrations of women's groups in Scotland. And I really enjoyed that, seeing how because I've had that kind of political background when I was a much younger woman. So it was kind of fun to see what it looked like in these two different places in Scotland. It was great fun. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, and I don't want this to discourage you, this is just because I want to be frank with you. I had one health crisis while I was gone. It happened in Dublin, and I had to seek emergency care care in the middle of the night in Dublin. Now, the real exacerbating problem was cigarette smoke. I have a hard time with it with my CFS. It's just one of my trigger substances, and it's really lethal for my asthma. So I got hit really hard with that, and so I got medical care. Now, again, to be perfectly honest with you, so that you wouldn't have to ask this question, I had to cancel some of the destinations of my trip because I had this health problem. And I lost some opportunities of destinations. I wanted to go to the Isle of Man because I have ancestors, and I wanted to go very far north in Scotland, and I wasn't able to do those two things. However, it did not take away one bit from the way I felt about my trip and the way I felt about myself for doing this trip. I ended up looking at this experience as just part of my trip. It was just an interesting thing that doesn't happen to everybody, and it happened to me, and aren't I lucky? And I'll be able to tell people about it. First class rail travel through the UK and Ireland is wonderful, and that is how I traveled. I wanted a reserved seat, and I didn't want to board and have to worry about getting crushed trying to get to a seat. So there were times when all of the other cars were jammed, and I was in a first class car, and there might have been me and one other businessman. There were a lot of situations that were like that. So again, I spent my coin on those things that would make my trip doable for me and that would help me manage my health while I was gone. It was so great to watch the countryside go by, all the green farms and the hedges and the cattle ranches and the sheep ranches and the beautiful coastline. Oh, I never tired of the view. I just felt like I had come home. I couldn't get enough of anything. One of the things I really loved about the UK cities, and it would be this way all through Europe, is you see all of these marvelous buildings that are centuries and centuries old. And next to them are all these marvelous modern buildings. And the old and the young live so beautifully together, architecturally and as human beings. And I really like that. I love the bilingual feature of Cardiff. In fact, all through Wales. You go through Cardiff and every sign on every building, every street sign, every description in the museum, everything was bilingual. I could read the English, but I couldn't read the Welsh language. But I admired this country. They've made a marvelous effort to put their native language back into their school system. Now you enter as in your first grade and you go all the way through school and you learn both. You're learning English and the native tongue. So I saw it posted everywhere, but I didn't hear it. So when I went to museums, I was always looking for groups of kids that were on field trips or something. And then I would just tag along behind them and listen to them talk to each other. And all they used was the Welsh language when they were out in public. And I don't know if that was required by their teachers or if that was their first choice. But it was wonderful to hear that. And I learned that in Ireland and in Scotland, there is an effort there to bring back their native tongues. And and get their population bilingual. There are very few there that are. I was fascinated by the way that the major cities in the UK have reinvented themselves successfully. After a lot of wreckage of the things that were their primary industry. Like they used to be, for example, Cardiff and a lot of places through the UK where coal was one of their major exports and they had bustling ports. It's not that way anymore. Um, Textiles was a big industry, and the making of whiskey used to be a huge employer, and now it's more of a modest employer. So now the main industries, and this was really fun for me, um, are the tourist industry and television production. In every city that I was in any country, they all were spending money on production studios, and BBC had upgraded many of their studios to state of the art because it is such a thriving industry there. I want to tell you my favorite destination. It's Belfast, and it probably wouldn't be anybody else's favorite. But because I'm interested in politics and how people get along and the trouble they get in politically with each other, Belfast was an attractive place for me. Now, Belfast is, and if I'm telling you things you already know, forgive me, please. But Belfast is the capital of Northern Ireland, which is a 6-county country that's on the northern part of the island of Ireland. And there's 2 separate countries, Ireland and Northern Ireland. And there's a lot of friction and differences. Some of it is political and it's of long duration, and some of it has to do with religion, Catholicism and Protestantism, particularly the Church of England. Some of you may remember, we read about it a lot in America, about the almost like the guerrilla warfare that was going on between the Irish and the people that were loyal to the Queen. And that lasted for 30 years. It was very bloody. There were a lot of deaths. And part of the tourism now, you can see the place where all of these things happened that I had heard about and read about for years. And a lot of people are martyred with their pictures painted on the side of buildings. For both those that are loyal to the UK and those that are loyal to the Irish. It was all very fascinating to me. You know, when you would board a bus or you were around people who were in the tourist industry, they would talk about this period of time as the Troubles. The Troubles. They described it that way in Dublin, and they described it that way in Belfast. And I thought, wow, this sounds like a PR euphemism to me, to camouflage a guerrilla war of 30 years. But I changed my opinion by the time that I had left. I came to see that as in a very respectful light, that this was their way, no matter which country I was in. It was their way of being able to talk about this 30-year war to the tourists, which is their biggest industry, without talking about it in a very conflicted way. So they would talk about the Troubles in Dublin from their point of view and their truth. And then up here in Belfast, they would talk about the Troubles, the 30 years, but they would be interjecting their truth, but in a very civil kind of way. And I walked away thinking, wow, this is really a life lesson to learn, and I really appreciated experiencing that. I met a woman in Belfast who had just returned from a hiatus in New York that lasted 30 years. And she had just that week returned to her home in Belfast. She left originally during the period of violence. one last story about Belfast. Some investors and some of the leaders there decided that it would be a really smart thing to do to create an athletic franchise that would attract everybody. And they could all be teammates. They could play against, another opponent rather than each other being the opponent. So they decided that the franchise would be ice hockey. Now, here's the thing. Nobody in Belfast knows how to ice skate. And it was like, I can't imagine how the planners and the investors didn't know that. Maybe the money was coming from outside the area. I don't know. They went ahead and they created the ice hockey franchise, and they had to hire all of their hockey players from other countries. So people are there now enjoying ice hockey, but it didn't accomplish what they had hoped that it would. I've been asked a few questions by people, and so I'm going to tell you the question and give you the answer, the ones that I've asked the most frequently. Will I travel again? Absolutely, if I can find the coin to do it. Will I do it soon? Yes, although I had to skip this year because of other priorities. But yes, I will. And it's health dependent. So it's an experience for me to want to take care of myself so that I can be travel ready when the opportunity comes. My conclusion to you is that travel is a wonderful accomplishment. If you're able to do it, do it. Maybe don't wait till you're fully healthy. And my last word on volunteering. If you're feeling like life is small and confining, consider finding a purpose and a passion and finding a group to which you can donate an hour or two here and there. I'm so glad that you came. That went longer than I thought it would. But thank you for tuning in, and thank you for being here.